Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again to the Britt Kanawha West Hancock Athletics podcast. This is episode 20. I'm pretty excited that this thing has made it 20 episodes already and have a lot more to go. Episode 19, I talked to Aaron Rasmussen, so we're having a little back-to-back Kanawha episodes. Make sure you check that one out. Tonight, though, like I said, Kanawha, I have one of the Kanawha Bulldog former teacher and coach, Rod Barkema. So thanks for coming on here with me tonight, Rod.
Hi, Dan. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yep, and Rod and I are keeping our fingers crossed. We've been doing sound checks for about 15 minutes here, so we're hoping that everything goes well and we don't have to redo this puppy. So before we get to Rod, like always, I have a bunch of stuff to get to. First off, I always start with my sponsors. Like I always say, the goal is to raise money for the Sanger Legacy Fund, and tonight we broke a record. We have 10 sponsors for the episode, so thanks to those sponsors. And I was just telling Rod, and I told the other guests, a couple extra minutes of the night will go to plug in my sponsors, because that's the goal, is to raise money for the fund. Those sponsors are Ewing Funeral Home, Mary Jo's Hobo House and Catering, Jay Hiscox of State Farm Insurance, Deemer Realty, Britt Vet Clinic, Farmer Jim by Jason Harley. He's the picture behind me, a little hard to see, but that's the best I could do with all these sponsors. A lady from my church down here in Indianola who wrote a book, Jan Rosga, Amanda Crumweed and White Barn Picket Fence. First State Bank and Britt is a new sponsor I just added an episode or two ago. And then lastly, Al and Joe Dorenkamp. They wanted to sponsor this episode since Al and Rod are cousins. Joe is a realtor at Coldwell Banker, so she wanted me to plug that real quick. She actually works with my cousin Scott. Thanks for sponsoring to the Dorenkamps, and I'm excited for this because Al was the athletic director at Central College when I was in school, and then Joe worked in the mailroom, so I got to know the Dorenkamps pretty well back in the day, 15 some years ago now. So I'm going to get to a couple sponsors here first before we get to Rod. The first one, like I mentioned, is Jan Rosga. She wrote the book Raw Survival, A Practical Guide to Living Through Loss. A week after graduating from high school, Jan's 18-year-old son David smoked a synthetic drug called K2. He took his life 90 minutes later. Jan recently had this book published about her grief journey called Raw Survival. If your life's been shattered by the death of a loved one, no matter how recent or what relation you are, if at all, if you're caring for someone who has experienced loss, you'll find comfort and encouragement in Jan's story and the book Raw Survival. I'll have links posted to find out where you can purchase this book, and then Jan and I also did another video to further explain the book and her story. And then also First State Bank, my new sponsor. They take pride in community-based values and want to be your bank. They take pride in serving the Eagle Nation communities. They can be your you can personalize your banking products to meet the needs of your busy life. Free internet banking, mobile banking app with mobile deposit. Try their bill pay services. They back the Eagles 24/7, just like their service to you. At First State, whether it's personal, business, real estate, or ag loans, they have products to serve you best. You can bank 24/7 conveniently with online banking, account inquiry. You can make transfers, bill pay. All are free services at First State. Check them out in Britt. Try the mobile app for your convenience. And while you're supporting the Eagles, you can check your account, make transfers, and pay your pesky bills. Real quick here, fall sports. Cross country led by Holly Lange. Rod, you know Holly.
Oh, yeah.
And her husband, John. They're good friends of mine. We'll talk more about them in a little bit, but John and Holly were my youth leaders in high school, and we went on some mission trips together, so we talk all the time. On October 4th, Holly's runners went to Lake Mills. The girls were third out of 4 teams. Mallory Lear finished in third place with a time of 23 minutes and 5 seconds. Sienna Weiland was 11th, Paige Coogee was 16th, and Amelia Collins was 17th. So they had a good night for the girls that night. Only one boy ran that night, and that was Evan Hinders. He was 33rd. And tonight they ran at Forest City, and I didn't get a chance to hear any results before we started recording. Volleyball, Michelle DeHart, head coach. They're 3-22 overall, 1-8 in the conference. They were at the North Iowa tournament on Saturday last weekend, and I did not see results on that. Next Monday, the 18th, a week from today, they travel to AGWSR to take on AGWSR in the first round of the 1A regionals. If we win that game, we go to either Janesville or Clarksville, whoever wins that match. That match is in Janesville on that same night. And then football, Coach Mark Sanger. We're currently 7-0, still ranked number 1 in the state. On the 24th, we played at North Union, beat them 42-7. Or 2 Fridays ago now, on the 1st, we had a big non-district game with HMS. They were ranked 10th, beat them 20-6. I don't think they sniffed the end zone after the first possession of the game, so our defense played really well. Matthew Francis had 43 carries that night. He was pretty close to breaking the school record for most carries in a game. And then last week we had a big one at St. Ansgar and won 35-0. And then this Friday is the biggest game of the season. Play North Butler and Britt. They're also undefeated at 7-0, so it's for the district title and more than likely 3 home playoff games. So a lot on the line there. And I'll be in Britt that night doing the podcast with Hagen at her spot at the 50-yard line in the top row of the bleachers. So I'm excited for that night. And then the playoffs start on the 22nd. Just a reminder, like always, to give to the Sanger Legacy Fund. You can go to sangerstrong.com to do that. You can set up recurring payments if you want to give regularly. And thanks to Al DeWard for making that site an easy way to give. And I was telling Rod before the episode started, today would have been Coach Sanger's, I believe, 76th birthday. So happy birthday in heaven to Coach Sanger. I miss that guy a lot. He means obviously a lot to all of us. So we're thinking about the Sanger family today as they are still missing their dad. Before, Rod, we get to you here, like I said, we're going to do our 5, 10, and 15 episodes ago. Always to just give these episodes more views, give more exposure to the advertising of the people who gave to the fund, and just kind of fun ones to look back on. So episode 5 episodes ago, on episode 15, I talked to Jim Trulson on Hobo Day Weekend at his house. I think he's 98 now. He had some great stories to tell about back in the day in Britt and his business. 10 episodes ago, on episode 10, talked to John DeLeon. And 15 episodes ago, on episode 5, talked with the 1973 state championship football team, Coach's first state championship team. So 3 great episodes, great people, great stories. I'll have those links posted with this episode, so check them out. All right, Rod, thanks for being patient. How's the audio sounding?
It's great. Great. A lot of good tidbits there.
Knock on wood. Let's hope it stays that way. So,
you bet.
all right, let's get it started here. Again, this is Rod Barkema. He coached and taught in Kanawha before Kanawha joined with Britt to form West Hancock. So just tell us, Rod, where you are these days, what you're doing to keep busy, your family, anything you want to share off the bat here.
Yeah, my wife and I, Kathy, we've lived in Forest City now for 34 years, which, holy smokes, it seems like yesterday we were just loading the U-Haul coming from Kanawha. But we're both retired teachers. I've been retired for the past 13 years. I kind of walked away from it at an early age and miss the kids and the contact, but certainly don't miss the schedules and all that type of stuff. But certainly miss the contact with kids. Stay pretty busy. We've got a lot of rental property. We still have farmland south of Ventura. I do some lawn care, rental properties and extra lawn care. I do some snow removal. The past 13 years, I also worked with a local farmer here working on the fall harvest. So that kept me real busy, but this is my first year of not doing that. So it should free up the fall just a little bit more. We spend most of our weekends on the road traveling to watch Winona State University football. I'm a graduate of Winona State. I played football up there for 4 years, and our head coach up there, Tom Sawyer, has been with the team 25 years, and he's going to be retiring after this year. So kind of made it a commitment this year to get to every game. And let me tell you, Bismarck, North Dakota is a haul. So, but we did make the game, so that was good.
Yep. How are they doing this year?
Actually, they're 3-3. They had a tough loss the other day to a Northern. That NSIC league is tough. I mean, you got Duluth and Mankato and Northern and Winona and Upper Iowa, and it's a real competitive league. They're playing well. I know the other day, 52-49. I'm thinking, boy, we need to harness up the defense a little tougher. But they're having a great season, and we've got a scholarship kid there out of Chicago that we enjoy seeing play and enjoy meeting with his family at the home game. So we've become real close to a lot of the parents on the team and the coaching staff. So it's just a great weekend out of town, and Winona's some beautiful country up there. So we enjoy it.
Yep, definitely. So let's talk, before we get to Kanawha, I always like to just kind of talk about people's upbringing a little bit, especially if they're not from Britt. or Kanawha and kind of see where they're from. So in our talks, you grew up in Ventura, right?
Yes, I did. Pretty
Yeah.
much local boy here. We farmed straight south of Ventura, 8 miles south in the Ventura Blacktop. Farm family. I had 4 siblings. There's 3 girls and 2 of us boys. Plenty busy on the farm. We had plenty of land to farm and lots of livestock. And in those days, I always thought, heck, a guy just will be out for sports, because if you're out for sports, you can get out of the farm work. But that really never seemed to be the case, because it was always there when I got home from work, we got home from school and sports. But I was a 3-sport athlete, played football for Larry Holstead. Actually, Larry's first teaching job out of Winona State University was at Ventura, Iowa, and I was a snot-nosed freshman. And I always tell him he was a snot-nosed first-year head coach. But Larry and I have stayed very close over the years. I know Larry went from Ventura to Forest City and battled the Eagles many, many years, and just a great rivalry and great tradition. As I said, playing football, running track, played basketball, not the greatest basketball player, but something to do in the winter. And always wanted to play baseball, but that pretty much wasn't in the cards, since that was in the summer and the school bus didn't come and pick you up to go to practice. So, so it was more or less just those 3 sports. But it was a great high school career. And it's amazing too. We're just setting up our 50-year high school reunion. We're going to have our 50-year reunion from 1971. That's going to be next summer. So I've been in contact with a few of my classmates, and they've been in contact with me. So hopefully get that off the ground.
Yeah. How many kids did you graduate with? How big was Ventura back then?
I think I probably had low 30s. I know my brother's class, he was 2 years younger than I was, and I think he had like 64 in his class, which was pretty amazing at the time. And they've kind of tapered off as we go. And we talked a little bit about the sharing program with Garner and so forth. And the sign of the times, all these districts, that numbers are tough to come by. And I know Clear Lake had looked at maybe the Ventura, and I think that was probably a good sharing situation with Garner, Hayfield, Ventura. I think things just kind of from the outside looking in, I think things are going well, and similar to the Kanawha Britt sharing situation.
Yep, definitely.
2 types of schools.
Yep. Yeah. And as a Britt guy, anytime you hear the word Garner, you're just, you cringe a little bit, but yeah, a little different situation for certain people, but we get older, we get over it a little bit, but And then you already talked about Winona State. You made your way there. Did Holstead have a little bit to do with you going to Winona State?
Yeah, Larry had a lot to do with that. He obviously played up there, and coming from the flatlands of North Iowa, my first visit to Winona, Larry took us up there. And of course, that was before I-90 was done. We went in on Old Highway 14, and you come down through the bluffs out of Rochester down into Winona. I mean, if you've never been there, you're pretty well hooked once you drop into the bluffs. It's just beautiful, beautiful scenery and a beautiful campus. And so needless to say, that's where I spent my next 5 years after graduating from high school. And, when you're participating in football and sports, whatever, the fall, I mean, it's pretty much on the road and practices. And to be honest with you, not that I didn't enjoy my home life at home, because it was a great family situation. But once I got to college, probably Christmas was the first time we got back home. So it was a great experience. Made a lot of great friends, had great coaching staff up there and so forth.
Yep. Did you guys have any success on the football field at Winona?
The first couple of years we really struggled. My junior year, we ended up winning the league. We started off that year, they scheduled the University of South Dakota. They were number 4 in the country at the time. They gave us a pretty good check to come up there, but we went into that game and I think they hung 72 on us. So, and we didn't turn the scoreboard, but I remember they had a wide receiver, and I could be wrong in this, but I think his name was Dwight Duncombe, and he was on Wide World of Sports. I mean, every touchdown pass he would catch in the end zone, he would do a full back aerial after his touchdown pass. So that was pretty amazing. So our eyeballs opened up pretty good, but it was kind of amazing. That was our junior year too. And we scheduled that game, and they gave us a pretty healthy check to play that. So the next week we were playing Minnesota State Moorhead, and they were picked to win the league that year. But we took that money and we were able to charter a flight out of Winona to fly to Moorhead and play. And, just like myself, the majority of the kids on that team had never stepped foot on an airplane. So that was quite an experience for us. And as I said, they were picked early in the year to win the league, and we went up there and beat them 39-13. So that was kind of a start of a good year for our junior year. And like I said, we won the league that year and had an okay senior year. But I look back, even that freshman year, I know they scheduled our first game of the year. We played Chicago Circle, and we played the game in Soldiers Field.
Oh, wow.
So that was quite an experience there too. And, we probably had just a smattering of fans in the stands. They looked like little gnats up in there in that huge stadium, but that's quite an experience for us.
Yeah, no kidding. Yep. Well, let me get a couple sponsors here quick, and then we're going to talk some Kanawha.
Very good.
Jay Hiscock, State Farm Team in Britt's, a proud supporter of Wes Hancock and the Sanger Legacy Fund. They can help you with all your insurance needs, including auto, home, life, farm, business, and renter's insurance. For a free quote or review, give Jay or Lindsay a call at 843-3563. Go Eagles, and thanks to Jay and his team for hopping on and supporting 15 of these episodes that we've been doing and will be doing. And then Deemer Realty, Renee Deemer, hometown hospitality and service with a smile. That's what Deemer Realty is all about, helping buyers and sellers make a smooth transition when moving within or to the area is their priority. Serving North Central Iowa since 1999, Deemer Realty has steadily grown over the years, establishing an outstanding record of sales in the North Iowa area that speaks to their dedication to every customer. That's Deemer Realty. Go to deemerrealty.net to check them out. So in our talks, you spent 1 year, I believe, at Schleswig before you made your way to Kanawha. So how'd you end up there, and how'd you end up in Kanawha?
Well, I tell you, Schleswig, Iowa, of course, I'm born and raised Iowa boy and thought I knew everywhere in the state of Iowa. But when I took that job out there, I drove and drove and drove, and I knew I wasn't close to the edge of the earth, but I knew I wasn't at the edge of the earth, but I was close. But great little community, big German town. We got out there that first year, and the kids we had were just big raw bone kids. I think we finished 5-4 that year. Speaking a little bit about Schleswig out there too, I had a PE and health major out of Winona State, and of course, that was a job I took. That was a job that was available at the time, and so forth. Did a few interviews and whatever, but that first year in Schleswig, which would have been fall of 76, I had a health and PE major, but I was teaching 6 classes of middle school science, and I had 7 coaching assignments. Now, when you hear this, you're going to wonder how that really happens, but out there at their middle school, they had an activity period. So the practices were done during the school day, and then kids could get on the bus and go home. But that first year, I was assistant varsity football. I have to look down here because I'm going to make sure I get them all. Middle school football, assistant varsity wrestling, which Ventura didn't have too many wrestling teams in their day. So that was an experience. I also coached middle school wrestling. I had middle school girls basketball, middle school boys track, and varsity track. So that was 7 coaching duties at that time. And, you're a young kid out of college, and there wasn't much else going on but teaching and coaching. And if I remember correctly, I know you talked about as far as salary, and if I remember correctly, I think that entire job paid $10,500. So teach 6 classes of middle school science and have 7 coaching duties, but you signed on, and that was your job. So
yep, exactly.
Quite an experience. Yeah, Schleswig is just between Denison and Ida Grove, and talking about dorm camps, I think Al spent a couple of years teaching and coaching out in Denison, so he knows that area pretty well too.
Yep. I remember talking to him way back in the day about where he had been before, and then he's from Sheffield, so not too far from Ventura and
Missouri Thornton.
Thornton, the whole SCMT Rockwell Swale,
right? All pulled together now.
Blends together now. So, yep. So, how'd you end up in Kanawha then? Your 1 year there, was it the 7 coaching jobs that made you go, I can't do this?
Well, situation there too. I was looking for a different position. I was not married at the time, and thinking that, well, the Schleswig job was a job, and at that time you needed to be employed, so took that job and kind of looking around. And basically, Daryl Zwiefel was the high school principal at Kanawha, and Daryl had come to Kanawha from Forest City. Mm-hmm. And so at that time, when Craig Bain had left, Daryl was looking for a football coach, and he talked to Larry Holstead, who was at Forest City at the time. So Larry gave him my name, and then next thing you know, we were employed in Kanawha and kind of back in the home area. So the rest is pretty much history after that.
Yeah. Did Kanawha pay better than 10.5 a year? Did you have to do jobs?
they paid a little bit better, but back in the early 70s, and of course at that time, there weren't any real huge jobs probably, and of course, I think I bought my first car for, 20 some $100 too, or something too. So, times were different back then, but yeah, I paid a little bit better. And plus the fact just being closer to home and closer to family. And, it was kind of unique getting back in the area and then being at Kanawha at a school that basically was in my league as a high school student and student athlete. So that was pretty cool.
Yep. And I'm trying to think back to talking to Don DeWard. What was your conference called with all those?
North Star.
North Star. I was thinking Iowa Star, but
Yeah.
North Star.
Well, there was the Iowa Star too. I think that
Okay.
was Vermont, Janesville and those guys. So
Okay. Yeah. More towards Cedar Falls area.
Right,
kind of that
right.
direction a little bit. Yeah. And talking to Don DeWard about that North Star conference, I think every school is now combined with another school or closed, right?
Well, you mentioned that, and I just happened to pull up the podcast from Don DeWard, and it was very interesting because it takes all of us just a little bit of time to sit there and name all of those schools. But you take like the Goldfield and Laverne and those people that didn't have football, but then you throw in Boone Valley, Renwick, you've got Corth Wesley Laverne, you've got Kanawha, you've got Sheffield Chapin, you've got Missouri Thornton, you've got Ventura. All of those schools were just vibrant communities with a great sports history.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of the sign of the times. But it's awesome where some of these schools can get into these sharing agreements or whole grade sharing and still keep some identity, like the GHV, where, they still have a facility in Ventura, or the West Hancock, where Kanawha still has some, I think, middle schools in Kanawha down there. So, and you just have to face reality sometimes.
Yep. And I loved my experience at Kanawha in 7th and 8th grade. We had a blast over there. It was just so neat to be able to go to a different town and kind of have your own identity over there. Where I teach at Interstate 35, we are a K-12 building, so preschool through 12th grades all in one big building. And you don't really have that identity like you do at Kanawha, where it was just 7th and 8th grade and you had your own staff for just the middle school. It was a lot of fun that way. So
it's your own building, and it's your own town type of thing too. So you said you're down at Interstate?
Yeah. Yep. Interstate.
Yeah. Truro, right?
Yep.
Yeah. In fact, it's kind of funny. Our head track coach in Forest City many, many years ago, Frank Munch, he's passed away now, but he started his teaching and coaching career at Interstate Truro and had a great success up here in Forest City. And then I was Frank's assistant for a couple of years, and I took over that head track job from Frank. But it's a small world, world.
Yep. I teach 4th grade and my wife does 1st grade, and I'm the golf coach. So we keep busy enough, but live here in Indianola. We like having a little separation from where we live and where we teach, but
Great.
And then you said you taught science. Is that what you continue to teach in Kanawha?
No, when I came to Kanawha, as I said, the interview process back then, pretty much building level principal, superintendent, maybe a search committee, maybe some community members, maybe some staff members. But when I got to Kanawha, basically I was K-12 physical education there. Again. We still had the old elementary building there, Kanawha. So I'd have my middle school and my high school PE, and then you'd have to, whether you have to gear down or gear up, going from seniors to kindergartners, I don't know. But so then it'd be a nice walk from the high school building down to the old elementary and have elementary PE down there. And there were some great stories. Of course, that building was a 3-story building, and that gym down there was, I don't know if you ever got to see that facility down there. It was pretty archaic, but it turned out a lot of kids, and a lot of tough kids, after banging heads on the brick walls and so forth, and running into poles out in the outfield of softball games and stuff like that. But the K-12, and then even in Kanawha for a year or so, I coached. They had me coaching middle school girls basketball. So again, I finally got to a point where that was kind of in my past, which was okay. And I enjoyed the kids, but basketball just wasn't my background there, and we did the best job we could. So, and then I also taught driver education for several years in Kanawha. So that kept me plenty busy throughout the summer too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I wanted to throw out a couple middle school girls basketball stories, because I just feel like there's not enough of them being told in this world. I coached at Southeast Warren for my first couple years, and I had a girl get the rebound under the other team's basket, and she panicked and couldn't figure out which basket was ours. And so the rule at this school was, with the hometown referees, was you don't call timeouts. I'm getting paid X amount of dollars to ref this game. You don't call a timeout unless it's absolutely necessary. You just let the girls play and they figure it out. This girl's holding on to the ball. She's panicking. And a girl from our team comes up to her and says, "Give me the ball." She's 3 feet away from this girl, and she does a full wind up throw and chucks it right at this girl's face, and instant blood just gushing everywhere.
Oh,
I look at the ref and I said, "Can I call a timeout now?" And he goes, "Yes, this is a situation where you can call a timeout." 8 of my 10 girls are in tears crying.
oh,
So
yeah,
worked up. And then
yeah.
then I moved to Nottoway Valley, over in Greenfield and Fontenelle. And my girls' basketball team, 7th grade girls, I had about 18 of them, and we were awful. We played Orient Maxburg, who's now combined with Nottoway.
Sure,
And
sure.
we were finally winning a game for the first time all season. We're up 15-10, which is in the fourth quarter, 15-10. And I called the timeout. I told the girls, "We're winning. They're terrible. We're slightly better. We don't shoot the ball unless it's a wide open layup the last, 3 minutes of the game or whatever it was." My girls couldn't figure that out because I had told them to shoot, shoot, shoot because we were down
Sure.
46-6 all season. Girl shoots a bad shot. We get the ball. I call another timeout. I said, "What did I say? Don't shoot the ball unless you are wide open." And again, we shoot a bad shot. I call another timeout. I put 5 new girls in. And all I say is, "If you shoot the ball, I'm taking you out and you're done for the night." And they couldn't believe why their coach was telling them not to shoot the ball. I'm like, we just need to run the clock out. But middle school girls basketball, I think there's a special place in heaven for all those people who coach middle school girls basketball. So
That certainly is true. I thought maybe you're going to tell a story. I had a situation too where defensively, one of the girls got the rebound and on the defensive end of the floor of the opponent's basket and got a rebound. Boy, I'm close enough to the basket, so put it right back up and scored for the opponent. So
Yep.
that happens now and then too. But
oh man, yep. And speaking of Kanawha and middle school basketball, I was the manager for Coach Ben Muller on the middle school teams, and he just let me sit on the bench by him. And our girls in my class, we were not an athletic group. We had a couple good athletes and not much else. Not going to name names, but one of our girls got to shoot a free throw, and it went over the backboard, hit the wall, hit the back of the backboard, hit the wall, and bounced right back to her at the free throw line. Didn't even have to move to pick up the ball.
yeah.
And coach just looked at me like, "This is, yeah." So always something. So
And we know as coaches, we're not making this stuff up. I mean, you
Oh,
can't.
no.
It's been there. It's wild.
You earn your $800 to $1,200 contract, whatever it is for that. So
That's right.
I'm get to a couple more
Pretty neat
sponsors
days,
here.
though.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yep. Amanda Crumweed and White Barn Picket Fence. White Barn Picket Fence has been specializing in newborn and children's photography for the past 13 years in northern Iowa. An expansion into farmhouse decor and gifts began 3 years ago with their first location in downtown Algona, and then most recently her second location in downtown Clear Lake. With 2 locations to best serve their customers, White Barn Picket Fence brings the best of modern farmhouse style and unique gifts to the North Iowa area. You can shop online as well at whitebarnpicketfence.com. And then Michael and Brianne Ewing of Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company with locations in Britt, Kanawha, Clarion, Belmont, and Dow's. Mike's a 98 graduate of West Hancock. His family has been privileged to care for the communities of Britt and Kanawha since 1977, pretty much when you got to Kanawha.
Right.
You can find them online at ewingfh.com or on Facebook. Give them a call, 843-3839 or 762-3211. That's Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company. All right, I got to pick on these guys a little bit. We mentioned them earlier, but John and Holly. Do you have any good memories of John and Holly Lange? I said we're going to get some dirt on them.
Well,
I just want to give them a hard time.
I don't know about too much dirt, but John and Holly, just great student athletes as well as quality people, as well as And John was one of those kids that really didn't realize the strength and physique that he had. Very quiet and reserved, and just a super great kid. But when the pads and helmet went on Friday night, he was a force to be reckoned with. So that was, and John was part of that great 81 team that we'll probably talk about later too. But yeah, just super kids, and still in the area and that type of thing. So that's really cool.
Yep, she started at West Hancock the year after I graduated, so that would have been the fall of 05. So she's going on 16 years. She started late. a little bit later. She didn't go to school to be a teacher. She had to go back later. So
Sure.
I know she's a very well-liked, well-respected teacher
Yeah.
over in Britt right now. So,
Well, you start talking about that, and then you really start dating me. And then when I start talking like this, I really start dating Holstead and all that type of stuff. But yeah, the years go on, don't they?
oh man, they go fast. I'm younger-ish, but I just turned 35, and man, how did that happen? Halfway to 70 and wondering where it went.
Well, and like I said, my next birthday will be 70. But, as long as a guy does things like this or feels good, and I really believe that the jobs that we had over the years can kind of keep a person young too. I mean,
Mhm.
interacting with youth and kids like that. And granted, there's always a few that you want to put your hands around their neck, but for the most part, we've had some great kids, great connections with them. And a lot of that has to be said just about North Iowa and the Midwest.
Yeah, yeah. And man, if you've watched or listened to many of these podcasts, that gets brought up a lot is man, North Central Iowa, good school systems, athletics are always strong, just quality people. That just seems to be kind of a recurring theme. So always exciting to talk about.
Right.
One quick Holly Lang story for you just to crack you up. So like I said earlier, we went on mission trips with John and Holly. They took us to Mississippi one year, they took us to Arkansas another year, and then one year we just did a camping trip in Decorah, and we were going to go tubing and we were going to go canoeing. And Holly and I decided to be partners in the canoe, and James Mallon, who would be Sean and Betty Mallon's son, and Mary Mallon and John Mallon, their three oldest were with us on those trips. And James was kind of getting us all in our canoes and getting us pushed down. And he goes, "You two are going to be partners. This is going to be a disaster. Are you sure about this?" We're like, we'll be fine. We both get in the canoe, and he gives us a little nudge down the river. And somehow instantly our entire canoe turned backwards. And we spent about the first mile and a half of the canoe trip facing the wrong direction. And we could hear James laughing at us the entire way down. And then sometimes in a river where it kind of forks and there's like a dam over here and there's a little island made of like mud and grass, we could not get our canoe far enough to the left, and we rammed into this dam, and we had to pick up our canoe and walk through what we thought was a very shallow island thing, and it ended up being about 3 foot deep. So we're carrying a canoe through about 3 feet of mud. The rest of our crew was done and waiting for us for a good hour-ish probably before we finally got to the end of the trip, and we still talk about that to this day. So wanted to get that story on tape finally. So.
There we go. Next time I see Holly, I have to ask her about it.
Oh man, we talk about it all the time, and we're actually that whole group. We're talking about putting some kind of reunion together next year of that group, and a lot of, like I said, Kanawha people. Ellen Ing, I don't know if you remember the Ings from growing up.
Oh yeah.
Yep, and then the Mallons and the Langs and lots of good people. So
a lot of great memories.
Oh yeah, yep. I'm gonna get to a Kanawha grad's son here. My next sponsor. It's the one you can see behind me that I'm partially covering up. Farmer Jim from Jason Harley was established to reflect not only the farmer's philosophy but also its practice. Lifting, moving, and constantly working are the staples of a farmer's toil, and these are staples that build, grow, and shape bodies. Through hard work, Farmer Jim workouts replicate the farmer's craft, the type of work that has built stronger, harder bodies for generations. Although the workouts change, the concept does not. Your body is the machine. Visit farmerjim.com for more information. Like I said, Farmer Jim is owned and operated by Jason Harley, son of Ned Harley. He was little before you got to Kanawha, but you know him and from the family. So Jason was really excited to sponsor this episode with Coach Barkema. So let's get to football. You were the head football coach from 1977 to 1987. You took over for a man named Craig. I think you say Bayer. Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Craig Bayan.
Bayan. Okay, I put an R instead of an N there. Craig Bayan. He resigned, according to the paper, to take a position elsewhere. And then just kind of to go back a little bit, since you started in 77, there were a couple good teams in there leading up to you taking over. The 73 Kanawha team was undefeated, averaged, I think it was like 55 points a game or something like that. The only other team that compared in that area or the state was Britt. They won state that year in 2A. Do you remember 74 through 76? Did you do any research on how good they were, the team you were kind of inheriting?
You know, you had talked about that in your emails and so forth, and I kind of looked back and really didn't find a whole heck of a lot. But I think they were above average. And coming in Kanawha, I knew it was a pretty solid town, pretty athletic town, and so forth. But yeah, and even coming in too, I had heard about the 73 group. I mean, you take a backfield that cumulatively rushed for 3,181 yards. I mean, between Harley, Trinary, and Jordanger. I mean, somebody told me when we came to town too, and I'm not sure, and it's probably true. They said they had one trap play or one play that no matter where on the field they were, when they ran that play, they scored a touchdown. And talking to people, it sounded like they were just that good. And as I said, I have stats here. They outscored their opponent 467 to 81. They averaged close to 52 points a game. I think that was the highest scoring team in the state. And they went 9-0 and didn't make playoffs at that time either, which was, I think, that Armstrong game kind of cost them a situation there. But the whole playoff situation back then, we'll talk about that a little bit too with the 81 team, where it's so different today. And you look back and think that, boy, if we could have had some of those shots that teams have today, what would have been. But So
you took over in 77. Your first captains were Denny Kraft, Sean Mallon, like we've mentioned already, Joe Jackson, and Dennis Mallon. How about Sean Mallon stories? Do you have any good ones on Sean?
That was my first. That was my first year there. And you take kids that were seniors. I mean, some of those kids are 18, 19 years old, and there probably wasn't more than 5 or 6 years difference in age between myself and them. But Denny Buckcraft, Sean Mallon, Joe, we called Joe the Beast Jackson, they called him, and then Dennis Buke Mallon. Dennis was one of the twins, his twin brother Danny. Those are the 4 captains that year. And I tell you, just great athletes, great leaders to step in. And we went 5-4 that year. We ended up runner-up in the conference, and just had a good solid year to build on. And as far as the first year in, and a lot of that has to do with community and kids and system and everything. And we talk about Sean. Number one, he's a Mallon, so he's going to be a tough kid. And Sean, not only being a great athlete, Sean was one of those kids that you'd be walking by the gym and he'd be up there in play practice. You'd be walking somewhere else and he'd be on student council. He's one of those just well-rounded kids, and just loved athletics and loved school. And that shows. I mean, here's a kid that has gone on to be a great teacher and a great coach and a great family person. And so happy for both he and Betty.
Yeah. Yep. I recently asked people on my podcast Facebook page who they'd like to see me do an episode with in the future, and Sean Mallon got brought up. Coach Travis Hagen, who coached at West Hancock now for 20 years, he said people have no idea how important Sean Mallon is to the West Hancock football program. He coached middle school for many, many years. I think he just gave it up a couple years ago. Seth Gopel does that now, but they're saying he did such an excellent job of teaching those kids the basics in middle school. And he said it made the high school coaches' job so much easier when they got to high school. They could get farther on with what they wanted to do at an earlier stage of the season with those younger kids, because they were so fundamentally sound with Sean leading the program. So, and was he a no nonsense guy back in the day too? I mean,
pretty much. Although even as coaches, I'm sure there are a lot of things that went on that we didn't know about, and probably better that we didn't. But the Mallon boys, they could mix it up a little bit, and then you throw in a few of those other characters too, and just great athletes and great kids, but still kids.
Yep. I always enjoyed Sean. We went to church together. Like I said, the kids and I went to youth group and mission trips together, and spent a lot of time over at their house. And he was always a no nonsense guy, but he was such a caring guy, and was always looking out for you and helping. And he's that give your shirt off your back type of guy. So, and Betty as well. They're always helpful and caring, and taught Sunday school, you name it. So, So 77, you guys were 5-4, second in the conference. I couldn't find conference results for all your seasons, but we got all the records from each season. Overall, you were 56-43, from 77 to 87. I'm just going to go through each season's record here quick, and then you pick and choose kind of what you want to talk about, and especially that 81 season. Holly Lange texted me a little bit ago and said we better talk that 81 season for sure. But 1978, you went 4-5. 79, you went 5-4. 1980, you went 4-5. And then 81, like we said, you were 8-1. 82, you guys went 6-3. 83, a little of a down year at 1-8. 84 bounced back a little bit and we're 3-6. And then your last 3 years, you guys finished pretty strong. 85, you guys went 6-3. 86, you guys went 7-2, and then 87, you were 7-2, and you guys were combined with Corwith Wesley that year. So, yeah, what can you say about any of those seasons?
Yeah, like we said earlier, I mean, my first coaching job coming in and having not a huge nucleus to build on, but some pretty solid kids, and going 5-4, and kind of got things turned around a little bit there. Had a decent season, and being second in the league. We were pretty high on things as coming in that next fall. That would have been the Mellon twins senior coming in, but I think it was either the first or second game of that year, Danny Mellon broke his ankle. I think that was the same year that Kurt Harley had some back situations, so we lost him. We lost a few other interior linemen, so that took a little toll on us there. And but still finished up 5-4 there, and in a pretty tough league.
Yep. Who was consistently winning the conference back then, or was there every year any trade-off who won it, or?
It was a little bit on and off. I think, Sheffield Chapin had some good teams in and out of there, and Ventura was always strong often in there. And we did get Ventura the one year in an overtime game, beat them 11-8, and I had that written down somewhere. I'm not sure what that was, but that was a big win for us, mainly with me coming from Ventura and so forth. But and the 86 season we shared with Boone Valley Renwick and finished 7-2. Yeah, we were KBV because their program had kind of gone down. And then the 87 year was the Corwith Wesley Laverne. And I think we went from being the Rebels, Corwith Wesley Laverne, I'm trying to think, we might have been the Rebels in. I can't remember what we were. I think we still were the Bulldogs with KBV, but put together a new color scheme and so forth when we were combined with Corwith. And Corwith had some outstanding athletes too that brought over on 87. That was the year too. We won the league that year and finished 7-2.
Was everything based out of Kanawha then, those 2 seasons, or did you guys like travel back and forth between their school to practice or games or anything, or?
No, when we shared with Boone Valley Renwick, I think it was a 100% type of deal that everything would stay in Kanawha. I think we maybe played a couple games there, but all practices, they bus kids over there. If I recall, I think the Corwith Wesley sharing, I think, was kind of a mutual 50-50 thing where, you'd split the season into different practice weeks and whatever, and game-wise too. But, we talked about that earlier, where for a lot of these schools, if they wanted to keep some of their identity, that was the only option they had. And to be honest with you, I thought things went really well with fans and students and athletes and everything. So, of course, back then, I think, and granted, we've got great athletes now, but it was just something that they had to get used to doing. And that was just part of their day. So things went well.
Yep. So let's talk that 81 team, 8-1. How close were you guys to the playoffs that year? What was the situation there?
Well, I was trying to look back and look at some of the situation. We got beat 22-21 by Ventura in Kanawha. And that was a heartbreaker. Of course, Ventura grad and all that stuff. And Ventura, had been pretty strong throughout the league, but had a great game that night, just couldn't get it done. Next week, we traveled to Corwith Wesley. We put 51 points on them, won 51-0. Our final game of the year was down in Blairsburg with Northeast Hamilton. They had a great football team. They finished the year 7-2. We ended up beating them 28-21. So, yeah, we finished the year at 8-1. And if I'm correct, I look back at some of the statistics. I think Central Fenton made the playoffs that year. Now, whether they were undefeated, I'm not sure. And whether had we gone undefeated, would we, back then, well, I think Forest City had a year where they went undefeated too. And even in 73, when Kanawha went undefeated, an undefeated season years ago didn't always guarantee you a playoff berth. But obviously we would have had probably a better shot at being undefeated and going in than we did with the one loss. But I think Central Fenton made the playoffs that year. And if I did my homework there, I think they lost in the championship game to Polina. I think they had an overtime game in the championship game. So, when we talked earlier, how would we have fared? That 81 crew, I mean, we had 10 seniors and 10 seniors on a team for the size of Kanawha. I mean, they were just outstanding kids, and it was just tough. Like I said, it was a pretty sad locker room when that 22-21 loss. But like I said, I got to give the kids and staff a lot of credit how we rebounded and won those last 2 games too. But and as I said, I think we would have competed very well. And I know one of the questions came out, well, how do you think you guys would have fared against the Eagles of Britt? And that's a whole different breed of cat sometimes. And we had a very, very good football team, but it'd have been interesting. Look at the kids of those years of 81 and even the track years. And you look at what has come out of Britt, Kanawha, Clarion in track and football in those 70s and early 80s. It was pretty amazing. So to be honest with you, I guess I wasn't real sad that we never had to play Britt.
Yeah. So it would have been fun to find out, but better that you didn't. Yeah.
And if we got a chance, I would just like to read through my roster of those kids that year. I think, they just did a super job for us. We only had 26 kids on the team. That year in 81, our captains were Curtis Eliason, Dana Kraft, John Lange, and Rick Cooper. They were our 4 captains that year. My assistant coaches were Keith Michalke and Mike Allen. Our seniors that year, David Scharnhorst, superintendent's son, Dana Kraft, Rick Cooper, Carl Johnson, Curtis Eliason, Harvey Reuter, John Lang, Jim Pauck, Brian Harley, and Scott Day. Those were our 10 seniors, which was, for a school our size, was just a great nucleus. Juniors, Murray Anderson, Tony Cockrell, Doug Kretlow, Bob Ridema, familiar name there, Todd Wilkinson. Todd was our quarterback. Bob was a little scat back behind fullback Eliason. Sophomores that year, Mike Carlson, Todd Christians, Joe Morris, Monty Nearing, Eric Steffi, Dave Reuter. And we had 5 freshmen, Brent Carlson, Bruce Harley, Kent Harley, Andy Perkins, and Scott Cooper. So, a whopping 26 members on the team, but I tell you, every one of them had a heart that big. And it was just a pleasure to coach those kids. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't, you always relive shoulda, coulda, was, and what would have happened this way, or coaching wise, or, were we just too young of a staff at that time? But yet, you give it your best shot and you live with the result. But, and again, too, you can look at those kids, and 99.9% of those kids have gone on to be successful people in the workforce, successful husbands and job and parents and whatever. So that's a neat part about it too.
Yeah. And you mentioned Harvey Reuter. His son Jordan was a classmate of mine.
Was he? Okay.
Played football with them. Unfortunately, Jordan was ready to be a good backup lineman for us our senior year. We were really excited that he was going to be eligible and healthy, and then he busted his knee in the scrimmage at the beginning of the season and didn't get a play till I think it was the last game before he got in again. But
well, and here's a little Harvey Reuter story too. That's when Kanawha used to have the Christian school across the street from high school, and I'm not sure when that really stopped or went under, whatever, but Harvey came from the Christian school. And, Harvey, I think in 8th grade, he was probably 6'3", 230. I mean, he was a big boy and good feet. And Harvey's parents really didn't want him playing football, whatever, but we got him talked into coming out as a freshman. And it's one of those deals too, when you got a kid that's a little bit hesitant about coming out, that's the last kid you want to see go down. And sure enough, one practice, there was Harvey with a fractured ankle, but he managed to come out the next 3 years, and he did a great job for us. And Harvey was a heck of a basketball player too. He was a big body, and he had touch that you couldn't believe, and just a super individual.
Yep, definitely. So what happened? So 1988 was the last season Kanawha was Kanawha and Britt was Britt. That was your last season in 1987 fall through the 1988 spring. So that was the last, second to last year of Kanawha being Kanawha. Is that when you left for Forest City at that point, or how'd that work out?
Yeah, well, I think if I remember correct, I think Kanawha and Britt did a year of just sharing.
Okay.
And then they went to a complete consolidation with the West Hancock. And we came to Forest City in the fall of '88. So I think that fall of '88, I think West Hancock and Kanawha were sharing at the time. And then that next year went into that whole, and then went into the West Hancock mode. But as I said, if there are people out there that might have a little bit better handle on that than I do, they can kind of let us know.
So did Kanawha have their own sports in 88, 89? Or did they play sports with Britt? Do you know? Do you remember?
I had that written down here somewhere. Let's see, the year I left, I think, was '88. And that's when they started sharing with Britt.
Shared everything, sports, school,
right,
all that stuff.
right,
Okay.
right.
Okay, because I know it was still Britt in '88. I didn't know that Kanawha was part of that team.
And then they went with the name change with the West Hancock, I think. And I'm not sure if there's something that has to do with the state, if they have to go through some various paperwork or regulations, whatever, before it becomes a actual consolidation of school district. But yeah, I kind of had that jotted down here, but my notes are failing me right now.
Yeah. So I kind of was going to ask too, like, who took over for you, like coaching football, but it sounds like essentially it was Bob Sanger, because they played in Britt for him essentially.
Yeah. Right? I think they shared with Britt that year. That was my first year in Forest City, '88, '89. And then I think they became West Hancock in '89, '90. And I could be wrong on that, but
that's the correct timeline. I just didn't know that Kanawha was a part of Britt in '88.
That's one reason I guess I don't realize why I didn't remember who would have been taking over for me as coach, because there was no coach to take over. So
it would have essentially been Coach Sanger.
Coach Sanger.
He inherited all the Kanawha guys. So
right. Yep. And I look back too. I'm sure he would have inherited possibly some of the coaching staff too, but and that would have been quite an experience to work right alongside Bob. But the Forest City jobs came open for me and my wife, and I mean they were couple jobs just too good to pass up, and knowing that there are going to be some changes with the Kanawha system. I mean, it wasn't going to be Kanawha anymore. I mean, still a lot of similarities there, but just wasn't the same.
Was there a lot of not bad blood, but was there a lot of animosity or anxiety about the whole merger, or what, do you remember anything about that?
I really don't remember too much about it. I really didn't talk to too many staff members, and I think there's probably more worries between parents. Kids are resilient. I mean, kids can take a lot of stuff, and who knows, there might've been more issues with parents from one community or the other. But from my understanding, I think the whole sharing and or consolidation thing has gone quite smoothly, as you can expect.
Yeah. And when you were talking about all those 26 players on your team, I was listening more to the last names, and a lot of those last names are still last names that are in the programs now. So it's a good mix. It's not just Britt. Sometimes people say, "Oh, Britt football still." I'm like, no, it's West Hancock. It's both communities together.
And I would be interesting. Is it Mark's the head coach, right? Mark, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I would be interesting, just and I don't know specifically what they're. And granted, anytime you have that type of a situation going on with the sharing, you're going to have some kids fall off. I'm not going to make that commitment with the West Hancock. I'm not going to, you're not going to have all those, but it'd be interesting just to see what the percentage or what the numbers are of, kids that were actually connected with Kanawha. But, and sometimes too, you start talking about that and then you start doing this too. So basically, no matter where you're from, I mean, they're WH, they're the Eagles, and that's what's important.
Exactly. And I think it helped having the people in place that were in place and stayed for a long time to make that a transition. So
exactly. And I know we had talked earlier too. I know too, when we had left Kanawha, of course, when I came to Forest City, I was elementary PE K5, and I think at that time we probably had as many students in our elementary building as the population of Kanawha. So it was a real eye opener for me too, as far as numbers and facilities and so forth. And Kanawha had great facilities for the town for what they had to work with, and things of that way too. But it was a good step for us professionally. But there are many days, even those first years, where you always thought about the Kanawha connections.
There's something to be said about a small town school. There's just and that's why, I mean, look at this podcast, the fact that we're talking about stuff from Kanawha from all these years ago,
45 years ago.
So pretty cool. Got to get to a couple sponsors here, give you a little break. Mary Joe's Hobo House and Catering in Britt has been a huge West Hancock supporter for over 28 years now. Travel Iowa voted the Hobo House as having one of the 10 best burgers in Iowa. Visit Mary Joe's Hobo House for lunch and breakfast every day at 72 Main Avenue South in Britt, or call them at 843-3840. That's Mary Joe's Hobo House and Catering. That's Linda and Mary Jo Hughes. And then Renee Deemer's husband, Jim Deemer, and the Britt Vet Clinic. The Britt Vet Clinic is also long-term sponsoring this podcast, like so many others. They're located in downtown Britt. They're there for all your small animal vet needs and swine vet services. Call them at 843-3416 or email the Britt Vet Clinic at brittvetclinic@gmail.com. All right, this is the part I'm really excited for because we get to talk state championships. That's always a fun thing to talk about. You were also the head boys track and field coach. Those same 10, 11 years, been the spring of 78 to the spring of 88. And one fun thing I noticed in my research, I was going through the Athletic Association stat book for track. 78 was the year they converted the races from yards to meters. So instead of having, what was it, the 440 yard, it was the 400, all the stuff we know today. Was that a challenge or anything difficult for you guys, or was that just a seamless thing? Like, this is just what we call it now, or was it kind of a weird transition?
I think it's probably just more terminology than anything. And you've seen the track in Kanawha, so it really didn't really didn't make a lot of difference. We just had to run the paint lines a little tighter and whatever. But yards to meters, and they converted a lot of that stuff for a while, and I think the transition was smooth, and I think the kids did a great job with it. And I don't think it was an issue whatsoever.
Yep. And thinking back to that track, it was all cinder, right? You guys.
Kanawha?
Yeah.
No, it was grass.
Grass. Okay.
Grass. Yeah.
I can't remember. I thought it was.
We never really.
Oh, go ahead.
We hosted a middle school track meet there, and basically it was a grass track. We rigged up our painter with a marking wheel on it, a can sprayer, and we would mark it all off. And then once we got established our inner line, then we chalked all the exchange zones. And I mean, honest to goodness, it was just it was unbelievable. But, you had that little sense of pride that we're going to host a track meet in Kanawha. I mean, it was just middle school, but basically with those kids too, I mean, we ran the streets, we ran that grass track, didn't have many hills, so we couldn't do a lot of hill work down there either. But it was a challenge in itself. And thank God we had a lot of talented kids that, we probably could have run on the roof and been successful too. But
yeah. So you literally inherited an amazing track team. Your first spring, 1978, you won a state championship. Had you had any prior track coaching? I can't remember what you said you did in Schleswig. Were you doing
I did, yeah. And like I said, ran track in high school, but didn't run track in college, played football in college. But I was a track coach in Schleswig, and Schleswig's track program was, kind of like the dental business, kind of like pulling teeth. But we were able to recruit a bunch of kids, and we did have a shot putter that was a state qualifier in the wrestling, and he was also qualified for state in track in the shot, but was not what you would call a real track community. And again, coming Kanawha, I mean, I was just the right guy at the right time to be fortunate enough to jump in with a community that supported the programs like that. And the kids, I mean, it was more, to be honest with you, as long as they kept taking a left, we'd be okay. And they were an unbelievable talent.
Yep. Couple of those talented guys, or one of them I have listed, and you're going to have to help fill in the blanks. Kurt Harley, he won the long jump in 78 and in 79. And then the 4x2 won the state title in 78 and 79. We'll get to 79 here in a little bit. Who are some of the other guys on the 78 team?
Well, as I said, that 78 team, we had one senior, that was Denny Buck Kraft. And we had Danny Ziegler was a junior that year. The Mallon twins, Danny and Dennis, were juniors. Steve Prignitz was a junior, and then Kurt Harley was just a sophomore that year. We scored 41 points, beat Hamburg by 5. Hamburg was the defending state champion. And there again, and Danny that was his senior. That was his senior that he broke his ankle. But so he came off a great junior year there. And those kids, again, it was just amazing. I know in one of the annuals, I think Kurt Harley as a sophomore, was talking to his teammates or whatever, it's something about, I think he won that might not have been his sophomore year, but the one year he won the long jump by a quarter inch. And I think in one of the annuals, it's something, a quote that, "Coach, I think I'll go for it." And I mean, he was one of those rubber band kids and he had the great speed. And I mean, his takeoff speed was unbelievable. And once he hit that takeoff board, he just sailed. I mean, he's just an outstanding athlete. So that was a great team that year too. And, even winning, that was kind of a surprise for all of us, but after winning that, and realizing that, we're going to graduate one kid off this team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that scored 41 points at a state track meet, that didn't score 10 for relays and 10 for individuals and things like that. So it was a great year, and a great sounding board for us to head into that next year.
Yeah. How'd the community, what was that like after you guys won that? Because I think Kanawha won a couple state baseball titles in like the 40s and 50s. So
Yeah,
it's probably been quite a while since there was a state title in Kanawha, right?
Right. Any type of state title like that. And, granted, they'd won some, conference titles in some of the sports, whether it be basketball or football or whatever. But, we pulled back into town, and I mean, that place was lit up. I mean, They were just, we had celebrations for days, I think. And it was just a real euphoric feeling. And for the kids and for the community, couldn't have been happier. And, at that point, it was kind of a surprise for everyone. I mean, I don't think anybody was really picking us, and we kind of had some kids that just came out of nowhere and had a great meet. And next thing you know, we're rolling into town with a state championship trophy.
Yep, it's pretty neat. I love anything state championship. I mean, that's just a big deal. Not too many people get to be a part of something like that.
Right.
You guys got to be a part of it twice, because the next year in '79 you repeated. You won the 4x1, the 4x2, the 4x4. So in 2 years, you guys won 5 either relay or individual state titles, and you upped your points in the team totals to 45. You said you returned all those guys except for one. Did anyone else step in?
Right.
Next season?
Team wise, like I said, we scored 45 points. Twin Rivers did. We doubled up on them. They had 21 points. As I said, Ziegler, the two Mellons, Pringnitz, those 4 and Harley returned off that 78 team. But, we had some other kids step up. Kent Meiskens, Scott Jackson, Bruce Kraft, Mark Stupka. Meiskens and Jackson were half milers and seniors that year, and Kraft and Stupka also ran halves and juniors, and they qualified for the state meet also. So the group we took down there, we went from 5 or 6 kids to we had 9 kids down there. So, and winning those 3 relays, if I look back at the statistics, and I think all 3 of those relays were state meet records at the time, which was just phenomenal. And, we talked a little bit about some of the stories of that state track situation, especially in '79. As I said earlier, I mean, the community support in Kanawha, no matter what the sport was. I don't care if it was the spring play, the state track meet. They never wavered. They were behind everyone. They supported their kids. They supported the staff. They supported everybody. So we had great community support that year. I had to chuckle. I know the Des Moines Register and the Peach came out in '79. Biggest and most boisterous bunch of fans, Kanawha, at the state track meet. And they were hooping it up down there. But I look back at a couple situations too at that state meet that year. Danny Mellon was in the 400-meter dash, and I think the meet had gotten a little bit ahead of schedule. And of course, kids are kids, and I think he was in the field house, like, probably coaches are harping on, stay out of the sun, blah, blah. Next thing I know, I'm looking down the straightaway, and they're coming to get in the blocks, and there's no Kanawha kid. So thank goodness I had enough speed and agility. I got my butt in the field house, and he ran out and more or less jumped in his blocks and got second place in the 400 that year. So,
that was 79, you said?
Yeah, that was a 79 group. And then that same year, I'm pretty sure it was that same year, in the 4x1, prior to the finals, we had a slight rainstorm. And of course, a lot of kids back then, or nowadays too, they'll wear the nylon spikes and no socks or whatever. But Danny Ziegler running the 4x1, and I mean, the gun goes off. He comes out of the blocks, and one of his track spikes is still sitting in the blocks. So he runs the first leg of that 4x1 with one shoe on. and hands a baton off, and we ended up winning the championship in that relay that year too. So that was pretty wild. And as I said too, that 79 group, those kids, the 3 state championship relays, and if I remember correctly, I think all 3 of those were state records too. So pretty phenomenal.
They lasted for? Did you keep track how long they did records?
I think they lasted for a while. I'm not sure how long, and anymore nowadays. It's, my goodness, it's like holy smokes. Yeah, I mean, and you, as a coach, you're thinking, how can these kids just throw farther, jump farther, run faster? But they do, and it's the training and the coaching and the facilities and things like that. You know, I look at the fact too. I look at our kids, man, all the workouts basically, and maybe the grass tracks helped us. I don't know, but it seemed to me, and I know one of the articles too said, what in the world's going on? You guys never were on the pink sheets. You weren't here, weren't there. In North Iowa, we don't run in much for weather. And Britt might have been about the only track that we ran on that was all weather. So we got down to Drake Stadium. I mean, those kids, it was like that track was actually pushing back. And I mean, they were just flying.
Yeah, it's kind of like in football with the Unidome, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
You have team speed. It really shows when you get to those last 2 levels of the playoffs.
And the temperature is all consistent, whatever. I think the breathing is a little bit more difficult, but if you're like West Hancock or Britt, you get used to that because you're down there about every year. So
again this year, they have a good chance. But
yeah, that's good. But and I know too, back then too, we had a meet. We'd always go to Dickinson relays down at the Unidome, and I know one that was early in the year, and snowstorms down there, and we pulled into the parking lot. Next thing you know, our station wagon is just buried in the mud. But so we finally got a record to get that out, and the kids went in there, and I think we set a couple indoor relay records, and that was pretty well too. Yeah, I just noticed here, that was Kurt Harley's sophomore year in the state. He won the long jump his sophomore year by a 1/4 inch, and it was pretty wild. But, and getting back to Britt a little bit, I mean, we always ran in the Eagle Relays, which is a great meet up there. It was close to home and a lot of support and whatever, but I'm not sure what year that was. Maybe it was 79, but I mean, I've got pictures of the kids setting their track sweats on the snowdrift on the, you know, because the straightaway was plowed out. Yeah. And I think Larry Holstead was starting the meet that day. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. But, you know, kids would peel their sweats off and around they'd go, and snowdrifts everywhere. But that was kind of the way they ran.
Speaking of a guy like Coach Sanger, so 41 schools in state history have won 2 state track titles, and 31 have won 3 or more. So for Kanawha, little Kanawha, like you said, that kind of came out of nowhere. That's pretty elite company to be in. And then 62 coaches in state history have had 2 or more state championships, and you're one of those 62 coaches. Bob Sanger's another one. He won 4. Steve Perkins from Britt at Madrid's won a couple now. Randy Hinkle. Pretty cool elite company to be in. So what do those championships mean to you? Oh,
they mean a great deal. And like I said, it's just neat to even see some of those kids again nowadays. And as I said, the community sport back then was phenomenal. And district wise, and I don't know, our kids, and maybe there's kids the same way now, they're really humble. And I think I even see that with the West Hancock kids in the football program. I mean, you don't see a lot of trash talking. You don't see a lot of this and that stuff. I mean, hey, let's take care of business. And that's kind of the way those kids were in 78 and 79. And, you know, we're with those kids that were juniors, we were pretty high at looking to 1980. But that year, Harley, Kurt, had a high hamstring pull, and we got him back, but he was never full strength. I think he ended up getting 3rd in the long jump that year. And, you know, you got a kid like that, and he ran a couple events, but was never full strength. But you get a kid of that caliber and you put him on the anchor of 2 or 3 relays. And I mean, the difference, he's a difference maker.
Yeah. So don't even have to hardly give him a lead. He'll take care of that.
No, he's going to reel people in. So.
So what were your interactions with Coach Sanger? Did you talk to him at meets or anything?
Yeah. You know, and Bob's one of those guys too. I mean, whether it's track or football, whatever, if it has to do with the sport or whatever, he's going to be pretty focused and pretty intense on that job at hand. And, you know, we conversed a lot, and most of my interactions were through track because, you know, the football never really crossed paths in football that much, but the track meets and always butted heads in the relays up there. And of course, when I did move to Forest City, I was assistant football coach for a few years. And of course, we were, you know, in the NIC conference, and, you know, it didn't happen very often, but I think it was, in 1989, we went to Britt, and I think we got Britt, Forest City beat Britt 26-20 in overtime. I mean, it
Yep.
was just a great high school football game. Just too bad somebody had to lose, but I do remember that. And
Yep. That was between 1984 and 1997. That was the only year we missed the playoffs, and I think that Forest
okay,
City was the game that
one of
cost
those.
the playoffs. Essentially, we were 6-2 that year. So,
Yeah.
but one thing I had a picture of it. I don't know where it ended up, but if you've been to the Sanger Field lately, they have a big sign that has all the state champions, state runner-ups, state semifinalists, and they included all the Kanawha accolades on there. So it's really cool seeing the track part of it. I mean, state champs between Britt and Kanawha in 74, 78, 79, 92, 2007, 2008. I just thinking back, man, if Britt and Kanawha were combined back in the late 70s, your Kanawha team and Coach Sanger had runner-ups in 77 and 79. You guys could have won 3A or 4A that year. You would have had so many horses. You couldn't have, no one could have gotten all the events they wanted to.
Just phenomenal athletes, that's for sure.
I just thought that was neat that, sometimes people might feel like Kanawha doesn't get acknowledged as much, but it's neat to go into Sanger Field and see all the.
Yeah, I've got to get down there and see that. That's really cool.
Neat. So, and just out of curiosity, did you coach the pole vault? Was that an event you partook in?
I did coach the pole vault. Of course, back in those days too, of course, I look back when we were in high school, even some of the equipment we had was pretty sad, and we probably didn't have that much better equipment in Kanawha, but yeah, the best I knew how I coached it, I guess, between a lot of reading and talking to other coaches and so forth with technique and things like that. But Wade Rout did qualify for the state track meet in the pole vault in 1981. He cleared 11-3 at districts and qualified for state. I'm not sure how he fared down at state, but it was just kind of an honor for him to get down to state. But yeah, I did coach the pole vault. And, after they dropped that, guy really didn't miss, okay, we got the pole in the bus, we got the vault, we got all that stuff and all those type of things. So once they dropped that pole vault, that's one less worry a coach had as far as making road trips.
Yep. I was going to ask you one question about your future seasons, but before that, speaking of pole vault, when I was at Central, to get extra credit for one of my exercise science classes, we had to go help at a track meet, and I got stuck doing the pole vault, where you have to take that pole and you and another person have to get that pole back on top. The University of Missouri brought their top guy and gal pole vaulter to try to get to the national tournament. Like they were like bubble jumpers that needed to like get one good jump and make it to Division I nationals. They came and jumped against like Central, Simpson, all these D3 schools. One kid was wearing a helmet at the D3 level, and then these Missouri jumpers showed up, and I was just amazed. Like their practice jumps were higher than the D3 people's top attempt. And I was just, you got to be some kind of a weird, crazy athlete to want to be a pole vaulter.
Yeah. Once you put that pole in the box, you're riding that thing, but it is amazing. And you watch Drake relays and stuff and watch those Olympians and those women and stuff. It's just crazy. I do remember one story about the pole vault too, when we ran a meet over in Emmitsburg one night. Of course, pole vault takes forever, and depending on what the height they start, but they didn't have any lights over in that side of the field. So they ended up putting trucks over there, and they had a couple spotlights just so they could get the event finished before the track meet was over. And it was crazy.
Oh yeah. Never know. You got to get the job done. But I was going to ask, so you won it in 78, 79, but you coached another, 8 or 9 seasons. Did you guys have any success in those later years?
We had fairly good success. I think, we were runner up in the conference there a couple of years late. And again, we had a good bunch of kids, good hard workers. It was pretty hard to emulate some of the kids that we had in the 78, 79. But, I think the kids understood that, track program was a good fit for the football and or basketball and so forth. I look back a little bit too. One name comes to my mind. It's kind of funny here, but Randy Yakel that ran track and played football for me, and his son McCoy played for West Hancock, and now he's playing at Waldorf.
Yep.
And so it's kind of fun to go watch him play football when we're in town or whatever too. So there's always a connection there. And
McCoy was a star at returning the ball in high school.
Yeah, I mean, even what he's doing now is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And I think, didn't he have one game at West Hancock where he took like 2 punts and a kickback for touchdowns in one game?
It was 3 punts.
Well, 3 punts.
Yep. And then he had a couple kick returns in other games. I'm like, why do they keep kicking it to him? Like, what are they doing? Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a stud. Yep.
Winona State's got a kid like that, little Jake Ballou, just a squirt. But I'm thinking he took one back 93 the other day, and I'm thinking, why do you kick to him? Of course, they've got other good returners too, but Squibbit or something. But
Yep.
so yeah, it's been quite a run. And as I said, those track years, like I said, kind of overshadowed the other, but we still had a lot of good kids and a lot of good programs, and that
Yep.
goes for that. But
Competitive and always.
yep, exactly.
Yep.
I was looking back. I was going to touch base on a couple of things. We were talking about some of the football things earlier, and talking about teams. And the year we played Northeast Hamilton, they came into town. They were number 1 in the state and knocked us off there. And that was the same year where, I don't know, did I mention the story where the kid was supposed to come and tell me that when the team got there and said, well, coach, they're walking, but their bus had broken down. But also we picked up a game with Lakeview Auburn, and that's when Jerry Schaffrath and I were co-coaching with KCWL, and they were also number 1 in the state. And I think we were actually ranked in the top 10 too, but we chartered a bus, and boy, we were thinking we were pretty big dogs going down. They went down to Lakeview, and I tell you what, they put the hurt on us pretty good. And
Jerry Schaffrath, wasn't he the coach at like Hampton Dumont?
Yeah, Jerry, if I'm not mistaken, I think he played football at UNI. He came in from Ohio somewhere, high school, whatever, Maslin. I don't know if he played at, don't quote me on that, but played for one of the biggest high schools in Ohio. But then he came and he had the Corinth Wesley job when we shared that last year. And I tell you, Schaffrath, he's a good guy. Now he finished his coaching career over there at Hampton Dumont. And of course, Jerry probably liked to open it up a little bit more than I did. I remember one game where he walked up to me, we're just pounding the ball down the field, and he walks up and, hey, coach, turn the page, turn the page. Let's run something different. I said, hey, it's working. We're going to keep pounding it. But
I was going to ask you, what offense did you guys run when you were the head coach?
Early on, we ran the wishbone. We very seldom optioned out of it. We ran a lot of power, a lot of counter stuff, a lot of fullback trap, things like that. Later on, we did run some I back in there too. Bob Ridimo is a great I back, running I back and blocking up there and so forth. But mainly the wishbone full house and the slot I. So those are basically the 2 offenses. I look back now and you look at the offenses and things that are going on nowadays. I mean, it's just shoot out at OK Corral, and it just does my heart good sometimes to go watch a West Hancock game or see somebody, line up on the line of scrimmage and say, here we are, we're going to run it right here.
The year we won state 2 years ago, 2019, my students at Interstate, my 8th graders, got really into paying attention to the West Hancock scores. A lot of it was because Coach Sanger was sick, and I had talked to them a lot about it, and I read the Ed Thomas book to them.
Yeah.
And they watched the semifinals with me and the state championship with me at school because they were during the day. And I just, we got extra lessons done the day before so we could watch the game. And a couple of my kids, one's the quarterback now on the football team for varsity. He's like, why don't they ever pass the ball? And I'm like, I'm enjoying it. And like, why would we? If it's, this is working, why would you pass the ball? And a couple times he's like, it was 3rd and 7 and they still ran like a fullback trap. I'm like, wasn't that amazing? Yeah. Like, it just makes me happy. Like, we just play smash.
And and I guess the guy can be a little too old school too, but they always say, bad things happen when you run, but bad things happen when you pass too. So I guess you got to be a little more balanced. And, the thing is, I think even at the high school level, nowadays you can get by maybe running the football while you're in the regular season. And I think Bob has learned that too. And I mean, Bob learned that and I think Kevin and those guys have learned it, the Sanger group. And I think they've adjusted very well, because every step you get closer to that dome, I mean, you got to throw it a little bit because they're going to fill the box and you run into those issues. But sometimes too, I think the West Hancock kids are just going, hey, put 12 up here. We don't care.
Yep.
We're still going to block and run here. So
yeah, it's a pride thing for the last 30 plus years since we've been in, making the playoffs consistently.
Exactly. And, there's always pressure out there to open things up, but you know what? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So
I get into arguments from time to time with people saying they need to pass the ball. If they'd pass the ball, they would have won 9 state titles. And I'm like, 95% of the state should be very jealous of the trophy case that we have. I mean,
99. Yeah, they would give their left arm to be in that situation.
Exactly.
Yeah. And granted, losing the championship, walking off that field with that runner-up trophy is tough to swallow. But you know what? when you know you've had some championship trophies along with it, a lot of people would love to be in that position.
Yeah, exactly. People would love to be halfway there. So
Right. Right.
we're going to wrap it up here. Thanks again to my sponsors, Farmer Jim by Jason Harley, Mary Joe's Hobo House and Catering, Al and Joe Dorenkamp, your cousin, Jan Rosga and her book Raw Survival, Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company, Jay Hiscox Estate Farm Insurance, White Barn Picket Fence, Deemer Realty, Britt Vet Clinic, and First State Bank. Thanks again for sponsoring. I have like 20 episodes booked out through next August here. I've mentioned a bunch of them on the last podcast. Just in the last couple weeks, I've added a bunch more. Anna and Sarah Mallon, which they're not Mallons anymore, but that'd be Sean's daughters, are going to do an episode. I'm doing Nate Scher part 2. He's my most viewed episode. We're going to do an extra fun episode with him. Steve Kelly, Joseph Smith, who was on that 2019 title team. He's playing at Iowa right now. Dave Patterud, the longtime PA announcer for West Hancock basketball. Kevin Sanger, we're going to do a part 2 where we're going to do a historical football episode. And then the 2007 football team that made the semifinals, that'll be a 15-year anniversary show. And then just today, I added Travis Hagen to my lineup. So I have about the next 20 episodes booked out through next August. Like I always do on these, Rod, any last words you want to throw out, any shout outs you want to throw out, anybody we forgot about earlier, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we touched base on just about everything. I would just like to close in saying how fortunate we have been up here to be part of 2 great school systems and 2 great communities over the last 45 years. Lots of great student athletes, parents, staff, and community members that made the journey a success, whether it be Kanawha or Forest City. And thanks to those communities, and thanks to you, Dan, for providing me with this experience. Appreciate it.
It was a good time. And I always end it with Go Eagles. But tonight we have to say Go Eagles and Go Bulldogs. So
there we go.
right,
Sounds
go
great.
Eagles,
Go Bulldogs.
Yeah, thanks, guys.